welcome to the original Gangsters Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Burnstein. We're going to go back up to the Great White North for some breaking news. Doesn't get much bigger than this. Montreal street gang Godfather Atna Tupac Onha has been arrested by RCMP on murder and drug trafficking charges. He is currently facing extradition to the United States to possibly have to face trial in Los Angeles in what we're now learning is a second phase of the historic Operation Giant Slalom that dropped late last year in 24 and indicted Olympic snowboarder turned transnational drug kingpin Ryan Wedding. So a lot to unpack here, and I'm going to break this up into two different episodes. So for more of the macro perspective, talking about this, like I said, it was a historic case that's still unfolding, Operation Giant Slalom, involving drug dealing activities in the U.S., all, coast to coast in Canada, Mexico, and South America. Ryan Wedding is on the run. He's a fugitive of the law and number one on the America's 10 most wanted list, at least in terms of financial reward for information leading to his apprehension. It's a $10 million bounty on his head right now from Uncle Sam, in terms of turning him in, not killing him. But for this episode, I want to drill down on what this means for the current gangland landscape in Canada, particularly in Montreal. Tupac Onha is the new age Greg Woolley, maybe not by coincidence that he is considered a top suspect in Woolley's assassination, was mentored by Woolley, came up in the Rizzuto mob organization. And I guess similar to a number of mentor-mentee relationships in the world of organized crime, often we see the mentee ascend past the mentor, and that ascension is oftentimes aided by the mentee murdering the mentor. Now, we don't know if that's what happened 2 years ago. This week, actually, it's a 2-year anniversary of Woolley's assassination. But RCMP consider Tupac and the Rat Pack mob, his crew, to be top suspects in the conspiracy to kill Greg Woolley. Greg Woolley got caught up in the war between the Hells Angels and the Rizzuto mob, which has now come to an end. And they went from, 4 decades of business partnership to 2 years of war. Now they're back on the same page, working together like nothing happened, like nothing's changed. Didn't miss a beat when they got back together about a year ago. Tupac has been a big character in us at the OG Pod, as well as our companion web magazine, The Gangster Report, in unspooling this just epic gangland soap opera that's been going on in Canada. We've been reporting on it for about 3 or 4 years. It's been going on for about 15, but there's all these different iterations. But in the last couple of years, Tupac has been the premier black gangster in Canada. He's the Godfather, according to our sourcing and seeing some intelligence documents from the SQ and the RCMP. There was allegedly some type of coronation in in a cemetery, Christmas of 23. And he, if this is true, because it hasn't been proven in court, but if you kill the king, you become the king. So Greg Woolley had been the godfather of the street gangs. Now it's Tupac Onha. He had been with the Rizzutos. Then he was aligned with the Hells Angels, kind of went back to the Rizzutos for a period of time, short period of time. But for the last year plus, Tupac has been independent, and he has declared war on the Rizzutos and the Hells Angels, as well as other street gangs. So that's why it's so monumental that he's off the street right now. Was arrested this morning. The murder is a homicide that took place this year in 2025. That's that he's being accused of. January 31st, 2025 in Medellin, Colombia. A Montreal drug trafficking lieutenant of Ryan Wedding, the kingpin of this Operation Giant Slalom, a guy that worked on the east side of Montreal named Johnny Garcia, was killed in Medellin, Colombia. According to the officials in Canada, as well as the federal prosecutors in the United States, Tupac ordered Garcia's murder and hired a hit team to kill him in Colombia last winter. So we didn't really know anything about that. That hasn't been, I had no idea that Tupac was being corralled into the Ryan Wedding case, the Giant Slalom case. I'd been aware of it. It didn't look like that there was any connection into the stuff that we report here about the Montreal underworld, meaning the Hells Angels, the Rizzutos, Greg Woolley and Arab Power, AWA, West End. It didn't look like there was a tie to that. Ryan, and we'll get into this with we're going to do a longer episode with Ken Pereira that's going to drop on Saturday. That's going to just be all about Operation Giant Slalom. But, just to give kind of a tease, according to what's being charged initially last October when the first part of the case dropped, Ryan Wedding did not have a ton of ties into the Italians or the bikers. He was doing most of his work with Russians, Middle Easterners, Asians, building up his empire, his drug empire. But now we see that Tupac was working, according to the indictment, Tupac and the Rat Pack mob were working with the Wedding organization, at least in terms of buying and selling cocaine. But Tupac's off the street. I mean, that's the big takeaway here. Quote from the press who did some of the breaking news on this. One of the members of law enforcement said, people in Montreal are sleeping a lot easier tonight with Tupac behind bars. That this guy was wreaking havoc at the forefront of this shooting, extortion, firebombing war that's been aimed at mostly the Rizzuto mob, but also the Hells Angels. But the majority of the attacks have been restaurants, bars, nightclubs, cigar bars, paying protection to the Rizzutos. There were some of them that were attacked, had backing from the Hells Angels, but this all started to happen when Pete D'Adamo, the Rizzuto mob underboss, was locked up back in March. Then Leo Rizzuto and the rest of the hierarchy, most of the hierarchy of the Rizzuto mob, follow him into jail in June. They're all facing a big murder and gangsterism case that has nothing to do with this current Tupac Onha and Ryan Wedding situation. And again, I know there's a lot of names and moving parts here, but according to our sources and people we've talked to, both on the street and in law enforcement, Anna has murder contracts out on Leo Rizzuto and Pete Diadamo, and Rizzuto and Diadamo have murder contracts out on Anna. I think Anna going to jail, honestly, gives an advantage to the Rizzutos. They can hit him, they can touch him behind bars, I would think, a lot easier than they could on the street. That might sound reason might tell you otherwise, but I'm telling you the reality of the way it works in Canada, especially in Canada. The Rizzutos can probably, and I would stake my reputation on it. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but in theory, I think they have a much stronger opportunity to harm Tupac Anna when he's behind bars than they did when he was running the street. So that takes a major chess piece off the board, and you see the way that the RCMP and the SQ are going about this. They're not really even chipping around at the fringes. They're going straight to the heart of the matter, right to the a lot of meat on this bone in terms of who you've locked up in the last 10 months and or eight months. And you're talking about Diadamo, Leo Rizzuto, Little Sausalito, Baldy Barbario. Now, Tupac Anna is off the street. Does this tamp down the violence? On the outside, it probably does. A big undercurrent here that really shouldn't be ignored is what type of, and I use this term, I don't use it lightly. How a 40-year-old Tupac Anna, amidst all of this instability and war and shifting allegiances, seems like every 6 months, he has been able to stand up a very formidable, and I'm going to say empire of crime that goes way beyond what a normal street gang boss controls. This isn't just drugs or shakedowns or even gambling. This is high wattage power moves at a criminal level that most street gangers, if any street gangers, most street gangers don't reach. And if any street gangers have, they haven't gone as high up the food chain as Tupac has. And you point to Exhibit A here is, based on what I'm hearing from law enforcement as well as guys on the street, Tupac and the Rat Pack have taken over a sizable piece of the docks, the Port of Montreal. And we know if you can control what's going in and out on the waterfront, that gives you a tremendous amount of power and leverage and the ability to make a ton of money. And all of I shouldn't say all of it. Well, in terms of stolen cars right now, that is a racket that Tupac and his guys have in a stranglehold. All of the stolen cars going back and forth in that port, money is pouring in to Tupac and the Rat Pack mob's coffers. I'm told they could have anywhere up to 30% of the docks on lockdown right now. We know for time immemorial, the West End gang, the Irish mob, has maintained control of the Port of Montreal and working in conjunction with the Rizzutos and the Hells Angels. 30% ain't nothing to sneeze at. They might not have grabbed a hold of the whole thing, but just that slice is causing a lot of ripple effects. And I've been saying this, I think, for a year or two now. Tupac has big vision. All these guys in Canada, huge balls, big ambition, very expansive, multi-perspective visions in terms of where they're aiming to go. They don't want a piece of the pie or a seat at the table. All these guys want the whole pie, and they want the whole table. So it's combustible, and these new characters pop up. Tupac was a nobody lieutenant under Greg Woolley back in the early 2010s when this thing was first percolating, and look where he is now, or where he was until today when he got picked up and incarcerated. But we're going to have to wait to see the immediate impact of this. But Tupac's not just locked up looking at a drug case or an assault case. This is a murder case tied into a historic narcotics conspiracy. I mean, I would say that he's in the same exact boat right now as Leo Rizzuto and those guys who are all looking at more than just drug dealing allegations. They're looking at murder cases, multiple murder cases. And it's not going to be a short sentence if this thing goes to the way that the Crown wants to go in Canada, or the feds want it to go in the U.S., especially in the U.S. And I think that's the biggest worry for Tupac right now. Leo Rizzuto and his guys are looking at murder charges in Canada. And yes, that can put you away. And it could put you away for 10 years, 10, 15 years. It's not going to put you away for life. Onha's 40 years old. He gets convicted in a federal court out of California for the narcotics trafficking at the level that he's being alleged to have been moving, and the murder of this Garcia guy who was killed in Colombia in furtherance of the conspiracy. That's life. That's life in prison, man. And it could just be the Rat Pack mob will be something that was like one of those stars that burns so bright for a night or two and then fades away, and shooting star, or I don't know what the analogy I'm trying to make, but one of those, a hot property for a short period of time, a group of guys that gobbled up a lot of territory really quickly. And this has been going on for 2-3 years. And it's undisputed that Onha, in terms of Montreal, he's the number one guy in the street, in the street gangs. And even before he broke off from the Hells Angels and the bikers, he had a seat at the dinner table and was dealing with the top guys, dealing with Marty Robert and his OG Hells Angel advisors, dealing with Baldy Barbario, Marco Pizzi in the Rizzuto mob. So this is a guy that has a lot of respect, and people fear him. And I made the analogy about him, with him being the 2025 version of Greg Woolley. Let's say what Greg Woolley was in 2015 is what Tupac Onha is in 2025, but more powerful. He is Woolley who rose to meteoric heights for where he came from, but Woolley was always a lot of his power came from his ability to put people together and broker deals between groups that maybe wouldn't be working as closely together, if not for him, or as well in unison, if not for him. Anna seems to have achieved more in a shorter period of time by taking the opposite approach, where it's divide and conquer everywhere he goes. And I can't overstate a street gang boss in any, at least in North America, if we're talking in the U.S. and in Canada. There's never been excuse the term if this is not the proper term, but there's never been a black gangster to control parts of an international port. Do you know how much juice that gives you? And then, just the money in terms of this, it's alleged to be this very widespread luxury car, stolen luxury car business. And we know from people that have researched this stuff, Roy DeMeo with the Gambinos back in the 70s and early 80s had a huge luxury stolen car ring going back and forth between the Middle East and Europe and Australia, Asia. And I'm told that that's what, it's like 50 years later in Canada, that's kind of what Tupac and his guys have put together. And they were let in. The rooster was let into the hen house. They didn't take that part of the port by force. At least initially, they didn't. They were ushered in through their relationships, through Tupac's relationships with Baldy Barbario and the Rizzuto mob, and the Hells Angels, and Marty Robert, Gilles Lambert, and some other guys, OGs in the Hells Angels. So Tupac has become a force to be reckoned with very, very quickly. But he's on the ropes right now. Like I said, the extradition is a game changer. We saw it with Leo Rizzuto's dad, Vito Rizzuto. He gets taken out of the country, and look how he lost his grip. And that's a grip that had been building for, at that point, 30 years. And he lost the grip. Tupac has been, and like I said, he built something very, very big, very, very fast. But if he's fighting a case or doing time in the U.S., it's game over, and people will be talking about Tupac in the past tense, whether or not any harm comes to him behind bars. Now, when I'm talking about him having issues in prison, like I did at the beginning of the episode, that really probably, well, I would say that the exposure point is much more accentuated in Canada than when he gets to the U.S. It'd be more difficult to touch him, I think, in a U.S. prison. But the Hells Angels, they have power. They have an alliance in some ways with the Aryan Brotherhood. So, I mean, you could, in theory, still touch Tupac in a U.S. prison. But if it would almost, it's like it's a true catch-22. It's like he doesn't want to. If you were somebody that was, Tupac ain't running from anything. And kind of as I'm reporting this, I'm going over it in my head. He ain't running from anything, so I doubt that he would be looking to get shipped out of the country to avoid some type of confrontation, whether or not that's in the best for his personal safety or not. So I'm sure he'll be fighting extradition, even if fighting it keeps him more in harm's way in Canada than would be if he comes over to the U.S. But getting him off the streets, even for a short period of time, if he somehow gets out of these charges, is a win for RCMP. It's a win for SQ. It's a win for the FBI. The FBI is looking for heads on the wall. And believe me, this is a big, big head on the wall. There's going to be press conferences with Kash Patel rolling out this week, talking about the second phase of Operation Giant Slalom. And I also want to, as I conclude this, I think just moving off of Tupac for a second, but looking at how he was ensnared by a joint task force made up of law enforcement in Canada and the U.S. I think this could be foreshadowing the way both governments in both of these countries go after Marty Robert. And I've been saying this for over a year and a half. Marty spends a lot of time in the U.S. And if the U.S. didn't want him in on their sovereign land, they just would deny him at the border. I don't think he's always necessarily coming over with fake papers. I know I reported that at one point, and I think he has, but I think the U.S. law enforcement wants Marty in the U.S. as much as they can have him here. And I think the RCMP does too. SQ does too, because they can, and I believe they are building a case in the U.S. We know there's a case being built in Canada that's been reported, and some of the conjectures that Marty is using produce companies to move drugs into Canada, fruit and vegetable companies, also using the ports. But there hasn't been any reporting about the U.S. investigating Marty, and I've talked about it with people, and I think I'm comfortable now saying this, that this is a blueprint that they're using on Tupac Onha that they want to then replicate and go after Marty Robert. So that's something that I don't think would be shocking if, when Marty Robert does finally get indicted, and he will be indicted eventually, whether it's in the next year or next decade, there's enough people gunning for him that someone's going to hit pay dirt. And I would bet dollars to donuts that part of that case against Robert is going to be coming from the U.S. And possibly from Interpol, because he's like I say, he's James Bond, man. He's an international man of mystery. You never know what continent he's going to be on. So Tupac Onha is off the streets for now, looking at a first-degree homicide charge and drug trafficking charges spawning from Operation Giant Slalom. We will have a full breakdown, deep dive of Operation Giant Slalom that will be coming out on Saturday. Me and Ken Pereira jump into it, and it's about an hour 10 minutes. But I wanted to get on right now and just talk about Onha's arrest and what that means for the landscape and what he's looking at. And it ain't good if you're Onha right now. You got to be watching your back, head on a swivel, and you got law enforcement in two different countries, and then you got the Hells Angels and the Rizzutos looking to box you in wherever they can. So it's never a dull day in the Great White North. Scott Burnstein, Original Gangsters Podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe. We're here all day, every week, giving you the best content, most exclusive content, most comprehensive content when it comes to breaking down what's going on in the North American underworld, Italians, bikers, drug kingpins, Tupac Onha's, Marty Robert's. We got it all. So keep riding with us. We appreciate the support. Original Gangsters Podcast, uncovering the underworld, one city, one region, one country at a time. I'm out.